right before I was going to bed, I discovered a government report number. I want to say this government report number right away at the beginning of this. And we're going to do about maybe an hour-long deep dive into what are they actually spraying. I don't know what way this is going to look like in the camera, but what are they actually spraying? That's today's topic. What are they actually spraying? And I don't know if you can see this government report number, right? Let's see, right there. GAO 26108013. Can you see that? Yes. GAO 26108013. What are they actually spraying? And all right. Okay. I haven't done a live stream in a long time, and I'm going to do this as a podcast. And so, because this has been a long time that I have not done this, I'm just looking at some things here on my computer, and I think I might lower this camera a little bit. Hold on one second. Okay. And I'm going to move back a tiny bit. All right. It's a little bit messy over that way. And okay, a little bit messy right over there. And this is not the ideal setup to try to do this. I am kind of doing this on the fly right now. And let me just adjust some things here a little bit. Okay, there I am in the center. And pardon me here. I apologize for this. We're going to dive in right now. 3 minutes in. And what are they actually spraying? Okay, testing. I'm going to just see. Looks like audio is coming through. I had a blue microphone that I dropped, damaged. This isn't quite as sensitive, so I got to kind of get it right into my face. All right. What are they actually spraying? I'm going to do a podcast. If you have not listened to my podcasts, they are at Low Lit Studio. I have a Patreon, Low Lit Studio Patreon. I would say that geoengineering and chemtrails and all that stuff are probably the thing I'm most passionate about in this lifetime, trying to get this waste management operation to end. And it's taken me a minute to warm up here. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to start reading right now. What are they actually spraying? How the energy industry is using cloud seeding permits to hide the world's largest waste management operation in plain sight. Okay, that's what we're diving into today. I've been working on this document for a long time, and the inspiration of it is my older brother. He can't look up and see what's happening. He's one of those people that mocks and belittles people that believe in chemtrails. And probably for about the last year, I have been contemplating how I would discuss this with someone like him. And that discussion has coalesced into an argument that a new piece of evidence came out last night, late, right before I went to bed, and it is that GAO 26108013. That is the Government Accountability Office. And they published a document last night that is very important, and it's going to be woven into what we read about today. What are they actually spraying? How the energy industry is using cloud seeding permits to hide the world's largest waste management operation in plain sight. That's what this is about. What are they actually spraying? Listen to this, how the energy industry is using cloud seeding permits to hide the world's largest waste management operation in plain sight. Before we begin, a government report number. Before we talk about what is being sprayed into the sky above, I want to hand you something. Not a theory, not a documentary, not a researcher whose credibility you will debate, but a government report number, GAO 26 108013. Government Accounting Office 26 108013. That's what I want to hand you. The GAO is the Government Accountability Office, created in 1921. 3,000 employees, economists, lawyers, engineers, scientists, policy analysts. Its one job is to audit the federal government and report to Congress what it finds. It also answers to Congress, not to the president. No administration can direct it. No agency can shut it up. It is the federal government's own independent watchdog, and when it publishes a finding, it is the system auditing itself. On February 23rd, that was my younger brother's birthday. On February 23rd, 2026, this is being recorded the day after. Today's February 24th, 2026. On February 23rd, 2026, the Government Accountability Office published a report on NOAA's, you know, the organization NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. The Government Accountability Office published a report on NOAA's oversight of weather modification operations in the United States. Hold on. I got my hands full holding this piece of paper here. It published this. I'm going to try to do this with one hand. Meaning cloud seeding. So let's just read that sentence again. Pardon me, I'm going to do this a little bit organized in a podcast, but this is me warming up for it. So the Government Accountability Office published a report on NOAA's oversight of weather modification operations in the United States, meaning cloud seeding, meaning what is being sprayed into the atmosphere above your home, your children, and your watershed. Here is what the Government Accountability Office found in its own words about the only federal oversight mechanism governing what goes into the air at altitude. This is from their own words, from the Government Accountability Office's own words. Here we go. NOAA is not, so the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA is not fully meeting its responsibilities to maintain and share weather modification reports. Operators may report inconsistent information or fail to report entirely. The Government Accounting Office estimates that over half of all reports filed with NOAA likely have errors, including missing required information. The $10,000 maximum fine for non-reporting has not been a sufficient deterrent. Multiple companies are conducting weather modification activities without filing any reports whatsoever, and the reporting forms have no framework for capturing what a sophisticated modern atmospheric operation actually contains. There it is again, the GAO report 26108013, February 23rd, 2026. This is not an activist group saying the oversight is broken. That is a United States government saying it about itself in writing. The report number you can look up at gao.gov right now. Go look it up. gao.gov. You can look it up right now. Nobody can call that a conspiracy theory. What follows is what that broken oversight is hiding. What follows what follows is what that broken oversight is hiding. The energy industry produces, we're just talking right now about coal. The coal, big electric coal industry, the energy industry produces 200,000 tons of toxic fly ash every day. 200,000 tons of toxic fly ash every day. Legal disposal costs billions. And when storage fails, it kills people. So it goes somewhere with no Superfund, no liability. It goes into the sky. This is really hard to explain succinctly. I've tried to, for the last year, come up with the most succinct way to explain this to a guy like my older brother who just thinks anyone who sees what's happening is a crazy conspiracy theorist. And anyone out there that's that thick-headed, I hope you're listening because this is really for you. This is an attempt at being succinct. The energy industry produces 200,000 tons of toxic fly ash every day. Legal disposal costs billions. And when storage fails, it kills people. So it goes somewhere with no Superfund site, no liability. It goes into the sky. Energy companies already hold government permits to spray into the sky with zero required disclosure of what they're spraying. We know that they, big industry, piped industrial waste into our water and called it fluoride. Now they load it into jets and call it cloud seeding. So is this starting to make sense that the energy industry is using cloud seeding as a cover to get rid of their waste? It's their waste management program. They don't need any, they can just get a permit to spray, but they're not required to disclose what they're spraying. So I'm going to just read that paragraph, this succinct paragraph one more time. The energy industry produces 200,000 tons of toxic fly ash every day. Legal disposal costs billions. And when storage fails, it kills people. So it goes somewhere with no Superfund, no liability. It goes into the sky. Energy companies already hold government permits to spray it into the sky with zero required disclosure of what they're spraying. They don't have to disclose what they're spraying. And the framework from the past to make this not seem like some impossible thing that they're doing, they have piped industrial waste into our water and called it fluoride. Now they load this different waste into jets and call it cloud seeding. All right. Part one, the waste. Part one, the waste. I've got something like 30 pages to read here, and the spacing is big and broad. It shouldn't take too long, but I think it's going to take us an hour. And I do think this is very important information, so I hope you are going to sit tight. You can always watch and listen at double speed too. Part one, the waste. Begin with a simple physical fact. Burning coal produces two things. The first is electricity, which gets sold. The second is fly ash, the toxic particulate residue of combustion, which has to go somewhere. Fly ash is captured by pollution control equipment before it can exit the smokestack because releasing it at ground level is regulated under the Clean Air Act. The regulation exists because fly ash is dangerous. It contains aluminum, arsenic, barium, beryllium, boron, cadmium, chromium, cobalt, lead, manganese, mercury, molybdenum. That's a difficult one to pronounce. Molybdenum, selenium, strontium, thallium, vanadium, and zinc. Class F fly ash produced from burning bituminous and anthracite coal carries aluminum oxide concentrations between 20 and 30% by mass. At nanoparticle scale, aluminum oxide crosses the blood brain barrier and accumulates in neural tissue. It is not inert. It is not harmless. The United States alone generates between 130 and 140 million tons of fly ash every year. And roughly, I don't really believe this number, but this is what they say. Roughly 45% of that goes into concrete, wallboard, like drywall and stuff, concrete, wallboard, and road fill. The market absorbs what it absorbs. The rest, approximately 75 million tons annually, must be disposed of through other means. Do the arithmetic that no major newspaper has seen fit to print. 75 million tons of toxic fly ash waste per year, 365 days. So every single day you're dealing with basically 205,000 tons. Let's just call it 200,000 tons every day. Okay, so now when we start talking about jets delivering that waste, one Boeing 747 freighter carries 110 tons at maximum payload. So 205,000 tons divided by 110 is 1,868 fully loaded 747s every day, just in America. I don't want you to get too lost in the numbers, but if you divide that amount of flights for the whole United States, that's about 37 flights per day per state, if you just spread them around equally. The clean math of that is in the whole United States, it's about 4% of the total flights in the United States. Every single state, the clean math is about 900 flights per day if you just divide it all equally. And so the 37 flights per day per state, yada, 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 you're talking about 4% of the total flights would be spraying fly ash. I'm just giving you some hypothetical. I'm trying to make it understandable by numbers, if that's how your brain operates. If you take this global, China burns more coal than the United States, Europe, and India combined. Conservative global waste fly ash production runs at 600 million tons annually. So 600 million tons divided by 365 days a year, that's about 1.5 million tons per day globally. Yada, yada, yada. 110 tons per 747 flight. That's about 15,000 fully loaded Boeing 747 freighters every day. So if China wanted to just spray their waste like we're spraying our waste, that's 15,000 flights per day. It's doable over a landmass the size of China. I haven't done the math of how many flights are happening in China, but in the United States, it's 4% of the flights. This toxic material has to go somewhere. And you already know what happens when it goes to the ground and escapes containment. I've done a lot of pieces about this. There's videos on YouTube about this, the Kingston, Tennessee disaster. So when I say you already know what happens when it goes to the ground and escapes containment, you might not know, but we're going to talk about the largest industrial spill in American history. So we're at part 2, Kingston and the price of visibility. Kingston and the price of visibility. December 22nd, 2008, Kingston, Tennessee. A containment dike at the Tennessee Valley Authority's Kingston fossil plant failed. 5.4 million cubic yards of coal ash slurry, a wall of wet, toxic gray sludge poured into the Emery River and buried hundreds of acres of surrounding land. There's videos of this on YouTube. It's quite shocking when you see how big of a disaster this is. We're talking about radioactive toxic sludge just covering a huge area. And it's such a mind-blowingly bad disaster that I highly recommend looking up the Kingston fly ash disaster videos on YouTube. This was the largest industrial spill in American history. The cleanup cost exceeded $1 billion. This is where the numbers get confusing because the actual cost is magnitudes bigger than $1 billion. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. The cleanup cost exceeded $1 billion. The workers brought in to try to clean this up, they were told the material was safe as dirt. They were not given protective equipment. Dozens of them died of cancer. Hundreds were permanently injured. Countless people are still getting cancer from this disaster. The litigation ran for over a decade. It doesn't mean the litigation's over. It's been running for over a decade. The Tennessee Valley Authority's internal communications entered into the court record showed the company understood the material's toxicity far better than it disclosed to the workers that were cleaning it up. All right. One plant, one structural failure. This is just one fly ash site. There's tons of these all over the place. One plant, one structural failure, one day. Over $1 billion before the first wrongful death suit was filed. That's $1 billion before there was even a wrongful death suit filed against the company. Kingston is not the anomaly. Kingston is the moment the math became visible. There are hundreds of fly ash storage facilities in the United States. They all age, their liners degrade, their structural integrity is subject to weather, seismic activity, and the accumulation of material over decades. Every one of them is a potential Kingston disaster. And after that Kingston disaster on December 22nd, 2008, every coal utilities risk management department ran the Kingston calculation across their entire portfolio of aging storage infrastructure and arrived at the same conclusion. Keeping fly ash on the ground in concentrated, containable, visible, litigible, keeping it concentrated, containable, visible, litigible, in that litigible form is an existential financial risk. It is an existential financial risk having it contained on the ground like that. The solution to that risk is the same solution industry has reached every time it has faced catastrophic ground level disposal liability in the history of American industrial civilization. It's like a story on repeat over and over and over. The solution to that risk is the same solution industry has reached every time it faced catastrophic ground level disposal liability in the history of American industrial civilization. Their solution is to move it somewhere the law has not yet reached. That's their solution to move it somewhere that the law has not yet reached. Part 3. The disasters you are not supposed to connect. Kingston made national news. What follows is the record of what was happening everywhere else. So Kingston made national news. You probably never even heard of it. I never heard of it until I looked it up maybe 2 years ago. Kingston made national news. What follows is the record of what was happening elsewhere, documented in court filings, EPA enforcement records, and local journalism that never became a national story because the national story would have required connecting dots the industry preferred remain unconnected. The first one we're going to look at is Battlefield Golf Club in Chesapeake, Virginia. Battlefield Golf Club in Chesapeake, Virginia. Dominion Virginia Power built an 18-hole golf course on 1.5 million tons of fly ash. So this company, this power company, Virginia Power, took all their fly ash waste and built a golf course. In order to hide the fly ash waste, they piled it all up and built a golf course on top of it. Dominion Virginia Power built an 18-hole golf course on 1.5 million tons of fly ash next to residential neighborhoods. Their own construction manager testified under oath. This is what he testified, that it was clear that a golf course wasn't being built. It was a coal ash dump. All Dominion ever cared about was tonnage. I took a bunch of extra notes in here, you guys, because this Battlefield Golf Club would be worth hours of a podcast alone. It's so bad. It's just so bad. It's hours of information to pour through, and it's so bad. So they built this golf course. It took them between 2002 and 2007. So it took them 5 years to build this golf course. In 2009 comes the first litigation. We're talking about multi-million dollar, like, it doesn't even count the defense fees that the company is paying their attorneys. So if someone's suing for millions of dollars, think about how much it costs the company to pay for their legal team. 2009 litigation begins. That's a whole long story of what happens in that litigation. We're talking about millions of dollars. Then there's another litigation in 2012 where a lawsuit is refiled for $2 billion. So now you got a $2 billion lawsuit from people harmed and injured and sick from this poison. And 2013, one of the construction workers who got cancer, he got kidney cancer, he sues the company. Then the golf course in 2014 sues the company. They sue them for $40 billion. So you've got a $2 billion lawsuit, a $40 billion lawsuit. One of the studies that comes up is that the water in all these neighborhoods will be polluted for the next 200 years. The golf course claimed that they were losing $100,000 per month. So this is just one example of one thing where, like, the company tries to get rid of 1.5 million tons of fly ash, hide it under a golf course, and it turns into like well over $43 billion in lawsuits. $43 billion. That's one example. And Battlefield Golf Club in Chesapeake, Virginia, just is one example. I have numerous of these. I'm not going to cover all of them. A little bit more from that Battlefield Golf Club. Wells in the surrounding neighborhood were found with arsenic concentrations 700 times the accepted safe level. Radioactive thorium, radium, and uranium were measured at twice normal background levels. 9 children were among the plaintiffs. Over 400 residents filed suit seeking more than $2 billion. We mentioned that $2 billion already. Dominion's internal memorandum coached their staff on how to describe the site to concerned neighbors. The language they were instructed to use. Sound familiar? It's the same as the Kingston. The language they are told to use is safe as dirt. Safe as dirt. Dan River, North Carolina, 2014. This is 5 years after Kingston. Duke Energy's drainage pipe failure released nearly 40,000 tons of coal ash into the Dan River along the Virginia border, contaminating 70 miles of river. That's a lot of river to contaminate. 70 miles. Imagine canoeing. You'd be canoeing down that for days. Let's say you canoe 20 miles a day. That's more than 3 days of canoeing. If you went for a canoe trip down that river, that's 3.5 days of being on a contaminated river. Duke eventually paid $102 million in criminal fines. That's nothing. Slap on the wrist. They paid $102 million in criminal fines. Internal documents showed employees had reported the deteriorating pipe as a priority concern like years prior. And the reports were filed, but nothing was done. Okay, so this is kind of where it gets crazy. This is a whole long story, but Duke had 32 other coal ash pits in North Carolina. They had 32 other pits like this. They were ordered to move all of them away from the waterways that they were near. That's a whole other story. The cost of moving 32 other coal ash pits, where did that waste go? Where did they move it to? And do you think they want to face similar liability wherever they put it next? Here's another one. Brandywine and Gambrills, Maryland. Brandywine and Gambrills, Maryland. This is like probably super poor black people area. The Gen On Ash landfill in Brandywine has been leaching arsenic, mercury, and 4 other pollutants into, I'm not sure how to pronounce this creek. I'm going to give it a try. It's been leaching into a creek called Mattapony. Okay, so the Geno Ash landfill in Brandywine has been leaching arsenic, mercury, and 4 other pollutants into the Mattapony Creek, a tributary of the, here's another creek, a tributary of the Patuxent River for decades. A federal consent decree was entered in 2013. A federal consent decree, that's sort of some legal jargon. I can't really remember what that means. It means that the government has to or the company has to say how they're going to clean this up. So the federal consent decree was like, yo, the company's going to clean it up. Here's what they're going to do. So they make this promise in 2013 that they're going to clean this whole disaster up. We're talking what, 13 years ago? 12 years later, so up to now, groundwater contamination has not been remedied, and levels of some contaminants have increased. So the company said, we're going to clean this up. They never did. It's only been getting worse. The contaminants have increased since the cleanup plan was submitted. In Gambrills, a class action over contaminated wells prompted state regulators to issue a $1 million penalty before the suit even went forward. So the company had to do the slap on the wrist of pay $1 million fine before there was even a lawsuit. That whole thing, I've taken some extra notes on it. It's confusing. Brandywine and Gambrills, Maryland. This coal ash landfill opened in 1970. This is 56 years it's been polluting this area. It's 140 acres. I mean, this is just huge, leaking heavy metals into the groundwater. This area spans 180 football fields. The only park in this area, this little league baseball field, is next to this ash. It's the only park for the whole community. And no remediation has occurred. So they haven't done anything to clean this one up. Town of Pines, Indiana. Town of Pines, Indiana. The EPA, Environmental Protective Agency, declared this community a Superfund site. A lot of people don't know what a Superfund site is. A Superfund site is like a superfund, fund like money. It's like a ton of money that's put aside. Imagine this. Imagine a company comes into an area and they pollute it so badly and they're not going to clean it up. They don't even have the money or the resources to clean it up. So a Superfund site is when the federal government is like, yo, this area is like so toxic that it's inhabitable. And we are going to mark it as a Superfund site and we're going to use federal tax money to try to clean this area up. But there's so many Superfund sites in the United States that a lot of them just sit not cleaned up. Nobody lives on these Superfund sites. It's declared too toxic to be inhabitable, and money is supposedly going to clean it up sometime. But like, how? Some of them are so polluted. Like, how do you clean it up? So, Town of Pines was declared by the EPA a Superfund site after finding arsenic in playground soil at 450 parts per million. In residential soil, arsenic measured at 888 parts per million. The EPA standard for safe residential soil is 0.68 parts per million. The soil where children were playing every day was more than 1,300 times over the safe level. 1,300 times over the safe level. So a company basically got rid of all their waste by creating a town out of their waste and playgrounds and all this stuff. So the fly ash was used as fill material in the whole neighborhood. And they just destroyed this whole area. And I believe it was just south, it's 1 mile south of Lake Michigan, in this like really beautiful part of Lake Michigan. It's 1 mile south of the lake. Some of the other notes I took about that. It was 23 years ago when the town residents noticed that their water was smelling and tasting bad. 23 years ago. They tested super high levels of gamma radiation over this whole town because fly ash is radioactive. So that's another sad fly ash story. We're going to just do a few more of them because I'm trying to paint a picture as to why they moved away. They're not storing this stuff anymore. It's too risky. We're trying to paint a picture of like they're not storing fly ash anymore. It's got too many risks. Too many risks. And the cloud seeding is how they're getting rid of this fly ash waste. All right, where did we just leave off? We were in the town of Pines, Indiana. The next one is Mooresville, North Carolina. Mooresville, North Carolina. Duke Energy's Marshall Steam Plant used more than 1 million tons of fly ash as fill material in residential properties, a school, roads, and commercial properties between 1996 and 2010. This is 14 years of fly ash dumped into the places where people live and children play. 1 million tons of fly ash as fill in this where is it? Mooresville, North Carolina. Enough for that. We're going to go through some of these quickly. Colstrip, Montana. This is in Montana, a little bit east of Billings. Colstrip, Montana. Unsafe levels of boron, sulfate, and other pollutants migrated into a residential neighborhood from the Colstrip power plant. The settlement, this is like a slap on the wrist. $25 million paid to 57 local residents, approximately $500,000 per family for having their groundwater poisoned. The plant continued operating, so they pay a little fine. They continued operating. But this whole town, this is not a Superfund site, so people still live in Colstrip, but they can't drink the water from their town. So their water is pumped in from 30 miles away from the Yellowstone River. They haven't been able to drink their water for 30 years. It's polluted for hundreds of years from this fly ash. So they pump their water from the Yellowstone River. We're going to give a few international examples. I don't even know if you call Puerto Rico international. It's sort of part of the United States. So Southeast Puerto Rico, AES Guayama. The AES Guayama plant used more than 2 million tons of fly ash at dozens of sites across southeastern Puerto Rico from 2004 to 2012, including housing developments, hospitals, and road projects. Multiple sites sit directly above the South Coast Aquifer near public water supply wells. In some cases, documented in environmental assessments, fly ash was placed directly into the aquifer. They placed the fly ash directly into the aquifer to get rid of the toxic waste. Out of sight, out of mind. There's little tiny fungus gnats from this plant right here that are invading my space. So, okay. Let's see here. That was Puerto Rico. Okay, so we're still in the United States. The national picture, 91%. Listen to this. In 2018, utilities were required for the first time to make their own groundwater monitoring data public available under the 2015 EPA coal combustion residuals rule. Excuse me. That's a mouthful. Let's try this again. In 2018, utilities were required for the first time to make their own groundwater monitoring data publicly available under the 2015 EPA coal combustion residuals rule. So, what that means is that the EPA told the companies you have to monitor the groundwater and you have to make that monitoring of the groundwater public. Of the 265 coal plants with available data, so of the 265 coal plants with available data, 242 of them, which is 91% of them, they were contaminating groundwater with unsafe levels of toxic pollutants. This was not an environmental activist analysis. This was the industry's own monitoring data. So imagine if an independent group came in and monitored, it was probably even worse than 91%. It's probably all of them. Because this is the industry monitoring itself, not some activist group. This was the industry's own monitoring data. Nearly 100 coal ash dumps sit in the Chesapeake Bay watershed alone. Maryland regulators describe them as ticking time bombs. 180 million tons of fly ash have been used as structural fill in roads, industrial parks, and golf courses since the 1980s. Okay. We're going to just look at a few international examples, and then you're going to hopefully have a pretty broad understanding of like how bad fly ash is. I'm going to pour myself a little bit of juice. Hold on one second. We are on page 8, 16, 24. We're 1/3 of the way through this, and we're at 45 minutes. We started a little slow. I'll try to pick up the pace. A little bit of apple juice. All right, drinking some apple juice here. Good organic apple juice. That's good. If you're tired and you're dragging, apple juice, I swear to you, will give you more energy than coffee will. Okay, part 4. What happened when the ground gave way elsewhere? So now we're talking about some fly ash disasters that are international. This one is called Oika in the country of Hungary, a town called Oika or Aka or Oika. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. October 4th, 2010. A reservoir containing industrial waste sludge from an aluminum processing plant in Western Hungary failed. So you've got this reservoir containing industrial waste sludge from an aluminum processing plant in Western Hungary, and it failed. 1 million cubic meters of caustic red toxic mud, a wave 2 meters high. 2 meters high. How big is a meter? Like 3 feet? So, like a 6 foot wave of toxic mud, it buried the villages of Kolontar and Devachar. 10 people were killed, 150 were injured, many with severe chemical burns. 40 square kilometers of land were inundated. 40 square kilometers. The Marzel River was killed instantly. So this river there was killed instantly. This gets so crazy, guys. This gets so crazy. So the Marzel River was killed instantly. Every living thing destroyed within hours. Emergency workers poured 1,000 tons of plaster into the river, attempting to bind the sludge before it reached the Danube. The Danube's a very famous river. So you've got the Marzel River, which is feeding in the the Danube, and workers pour 1,000 tons of plaster into the river to try to bind the sludge before it reaches the Danube. This is their solution. It didn't work. The sludge reached the Danube on October 7th. So 3 days later, it reaches the Danube. This is in 2010. And it threatens the water supply for Croatia, Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Moldova, and Ukraine. We're talking like millions of people downstream. This highly toxic sludge threatens the water supply for Croatia, Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Moldova, and Ukraine, all downstream in 2010. Hungary declared this a national emergency. The government nationalized the company. The managing director was arrested. Criminal proceedings ran until 2019. So 9 years of criminal proceedings. 10 company officials were convicted of negligence. I'm surprised if this is the US, nobody would get in trouble. The European Commission had placed this specific storage pond on a 2006, so 4 years before, it was placed on a watch list of sites at risk of polluting the Danube. So 4 years prior, they're like, oh, this is probably going to pollute the Danube. Environmental groups had been pushing for its closure for years and nobody acted. The detail that belongs in every document about airborne fly ash. So researchers who studied the Oika disaster noted that under unfavorable meteorological conditions, so during unfavorable weather, the dry red mud sediment could emit very high amounts of respirable alkaline particles. So the wind would blow, the dust from this whole slurry pond would blow up into the air over a wide area. And the disaster visible on the ground was simultaneously creating an invisible airborne contamination problem that could not be seen, tracked, or litigated. Geez, man. So was this hold on, I'm a little confused. I'm seeing if these researchers studied this. Oh, okay. So this is after the disaster. This is after it already spread. It spread out so far and wide that anytime the wind would kick up, it would blow this toxic dust everywhere. So now you've got toxic dust blowing all over the place. Folks, they don't want to store this toxic waste. It's a lot easier for them to spray it as cloud seeding, and you're going to see how they do it. Another place, this is in Romania. So that one was just in Hungary. This one's in Romania. It's called Bayumare, Romania, January 2000, so 26 years ago. A dam at the Orul gold processing facility failed. A cyanide containing wastewater with cyanide levels 400 times the maximum safe level traveled through 4 countries via the same river, the Danube system. More than 2.5 million people were left without safe drinking water. 2.5 million people. Just let's poison 2.5 million people. More than 1,000 kilometers of river were damaged. That is so much river damaged. 1,000 kilometers. If you were to drive that far in a car, you're talking like what would that be, like an 8-hour drive or something? So in a canoe, you're talking like days upon days. 1,000 kilometers of river were damaged. Hungary called it the worst environmental disaster in Central Europe in 30 years. That happened before the one we just talked about. So then 10 years after they called it the worst environmental disaster, then Hungary had their own. All right, we've got a couple more of these. It's important to build this case as to why they do not want to be saving this, stockpiling this toxic waste. It's easier for them to just spray it out of airplanes. Los Frailes, the Los Frailes mine in Doñana, Spain. The Los Frailes mine in Doñana, Spain. The tailings dam at Bolidens Los Frailes, how do you pronounce it again? Frailes, Los Frailes. The tailings dam at Boliden Los Frailes mine failed, contaminating the surroundings of Doñana National Park, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Boliden is a Swedish company. They had not paid a single euro in damages for the Doñana contamination as of 2010, 12 years after the spill. So that one happened in 1998. 12 years later, they still haven't paid a dime for it. India, the scale that has no Western equivalent. We're going to do India real quick and not linger on here, but there's so many disasters there. 76 major coal ash pond accidents occurred in India between 2010 and 2020. Researchers noted this figure represents only documented incidents, that most failures go unreported. So they don't even have the infrastructure for people to report these failures. So they had 76 major coal ash pond accidents between 2010 and 2020. 76. And they say it represents a small fraction of how many there actually really are. Between 80,000 and 115,000 premature deaths in India annually are attributed to coal ash exposure. Korba Chhattisgarh, another place in India. 10 thermal power plants in one region. Air pollution measured at 28 times the national standard. Residents describe ash particles in their throats and eyes daily. The Rehund Reservoir, the only drinking water source for multiple districts, has been described in a Supreme Court petition as contaminated and unfit for consumption. The Singrauli and Sonbhadra districts that depend on it are among the most contaminated regions on Earth. The Karadi Thermal Power Plant in Maharashtra. The Karadi Thermal Power Plant in Maharashtra. I hope I'm pronouncing these words right. A fly ash dike breach flooded three villages. A fly ash dike breach flooded three villages and contaminated two rivers supplying drinking water. This is in 2022. Contaminated two rivers supplying drinking water for the city of Nagpur. The city's municipal corporation was forced to stop drawing drinking water from one side of the Kanhun River. This is 2022. They've had like so many fly ash disasters. We'd be having these all the time too if they weren't spraying this in the atmosphere. The Sundarbans, I like that name. The Sundarbans in India and Bangladesh. Approximately 40 barges carrying fly ash from India to Bangladesh transit daily through the Sundarbans, one of the world's largest mangrove ecosystems and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Frequent capsizing is documented. Oh my God. Can you imagine? 40 barges of fly ash daily through a World Heritage Site because it has to go somewhere. These barges are capsizing regularly. The radioactive finding. This is one thing people don't really know about fly ash. The radioactive finding. Peer-reviewed scientific literature documents that the radioactive emission from fly ash generated at a coal-fired power plant is 100 times greater, you hear this, than a nuclear power plant of equivalent energy output. Peer-reviewed scientific literature documents that the radioactive emission from fly ash generated at a coal-fired power plant is 100 times greater than a nuclear power plant of equivalent energy output. Fly ash concentrates uranium, it concentrates radium, it concentrates thorium, and other radionuclides. It concentrates these things. There is higher infant mortality rates. The higher infant mortality rates have been documented in regions with high coal combustion in China, Chile, Mexico, Thailand, Germany, and Australia, and the United States. Every one of these disasters happen. Here's some trying to speak succinctly to the people like my brother Sean out there right now. This is another one of these succinct quotes that he has got to hear. Every one of these disasters, hear me clearly, every one of these disasters happened because the waste was on the ground where it could be seen, photographed, measured, and litigated. The atmosphere has produced none of these headlines, not because nothing is depositing there, because what rains down across a continent cannot be traced to a single responsible party in a courtroom. One more time and faster. Every one of these disasters happened because the waste was on the ground where it could be seen, photographed, measured, and litigated. The atmosphere has produced none of these headlines, not because nothing is depositing there, because what rains down across a continent cannot be traced to a single responsible party in a courtroom. It's rather genius. This is a good test. I don't know how I'm going to get this podcast in quickly. This is so hard to do quickly, you guys. Part 5. What time is it? 9:29 my time. It's hard talking for an hour. I don't know how podcasters do this. I don't know how they do it. I don't really like talking, as hard as that is to believe. I'd rather listen. Man, I hope that you guys are hanging with me. There's about 25 pages to read. I'm on page 11. This is the hardest part, is just like what we got through. It's going to go faster now. Just going through those places with names that are difficult to pronounce and all that stuff, it slows me down. This is where it gets really important. All right, let me just show you what we're dealing with here. Part 5, the permit. Can you see that? Part 5, the permit, the document that changes everything. Part 5, the permit, the document that changes everything. I hope my audio, I don't even know if you guys can hear me. I have no idea. The document that changes everything. Here is where theory ends and administrative record begins. Part 5, the permit, the document that changes everything. Here is where theory ends and administrative record begins. Idaho Power Company. I want to give a quick little backstory. I was listening to a live event on X maybe 2 years ago, and one of the senators from Idaho was speaking, and she was saying that Idaho allows companies to spray from airplanes, but the government does not require those companies to disclose what they're spraying. And that blew my mind. And that was like the aha moment of how to speak to some idiot like my brother who can't see what's happening. It was like, we know they're spraying. What are they spraying? Like the state of Idaho. And then she talked about all these other states, that tons of states are allowing companies to spray under cloud seeding, but the companies in all those states, none of them are required to disclose what they're spraying. Okay. So this is the permit. And this goes right to hearing her like 2 years ago on that live conversation. Idaho Power Company, an energy utility with coal combustion assets and fly ash disposal obligations, holds active cloud seeding permits issued by the Idaho Department of Water Resources. This is public record, available today at idwr.idaho.gov. idwr.idaho.gov. This is public record. I'm going to just read that sentence one more time and then we're going to keep going. Idaho Power Company. We're talking about one of these power companies that produces tons of fly ash. They're an energy utility with coal combustion assets and fly ash disposal obligations. They hold active cloud seeding permits issued by the Idaho Department of Water Resources. Public record, available today at idwr.idaho.gov. Not a government atmospheric research agency, not a university meteorology program, an energy company holding a legal government permit to conduct atmospheric aerosol operations above Idaho. And many other states have similar permits. Idaho is not alone. States with active licensed cloud seeding operations include Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, California, North Dakota, Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, and more. Energy affiliated companies and their contractors operate under these permits. The Western States Water Council has coordinated multi-state cloud seeding programs for decades. Weather Modification Incorporated, a private company based in Fargo, North Dakota, is one of the largest commercial cloud seeding contractors in the United States. Their client list includes energy companies. Their contracts are not public. Their payload specifications are not disclosed. Quick detour to China. China openly operates the largest weather modification program in human history and issues press releases about it. United Arab Emirates conducts cloud seeding operations daily. Russia, India, Pakistan, Israel, Thailand, and Australia all operate documented atmospheric modification programs. The United States Air Force published Weather as a Force Multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. They wrote that in 1996, describing deliberate introduction of materials into the atmosphere. We're well past 2025. The debate about whether atmospheric modification is over. The only question, this is the only question, the question that has no required answer under any current law is, what is that question? What do you think it is? The question that has no required answer under any current law is, here's the question. What is in the payload? What is in the payload? Not one state that issues cloud seeding permits requires the operating company to publicly disclose. Words are hard, guys. Not one state that issues cloud seeding permits requires the operating company to publicly disclose what materials are being introduced into the atmosphere. They don't have to say. No federal requirement, not even the federal government requires it. No independent laboratory verification, no material safety data sheet filed publicly, no post operation atmospheric testing required by permit terms. They don't have to say, they don't have to test. Nobody's testing, nobody's looking. The permit says cloud seeding operation. The permit does not say what is in it. This is the most important thing right here. The gap between the legal permission to spray and the complete absence of any requirement to disclose what is sprayed is where 200,000 tons of daily American fly ash waste can disappear without ever touching the ground. I mean, it falls to the ground, but without ever generating a Kingston. I'm going to make a note on here because it touches the ground, but without ever generating a Kingston. Hold on one second. I'm still editing this document here. This live YouTube video right now is me trying to just figure out how to say this quicker and see how long this is going to take before I try to do a podcast of it. Do you guys get how important this part is? This is the gist of it right here. The gap between the legal permission to spray and the complete absence of any requirement to disclose what is sprayed is where 200,000 tons of daily American fly ash waste can disappear without ever generating a Kingston disaster. Part 6, the financial case, why this makes perfect economic sense. I don't want to get into the numbers too much. I'm going to try to just fly through this. What legal ground disposal costs? When you start looking at the numbers, there's no way to really show what the real numbers are. Everything I'm going to say is way more conservative when what the real numbers are, because once there's litigation, it doesn't include how much the attorneys are being paid. It doesn't include court filing costs, all these things. It doesn't include litigation after litigation. These litigations, when you start talking about them, are way bigger than what we're going to even say here number wise. Part 6, the financial case, why this makes perfect economic sense. What legal ground disposal costs? EPA compliant fly ash landfill disposal runs between $15 and $50 per ton, using a conservative $30 per ton documented in EPA's own economic analysis of the 2015 coal combustion residuals rule. So let's just say 75 million tons times $30 a ton. You're talking about 2 billion. I'm going to just cut this into easier numbers. $2.25 billion. Let's just call it $2 billion every year. So to store this fly ash is $2 billion every year. This is not counting the litigations and lawsuits and water contamination and water monitoring. Just to store the tonnage is $2.25 billion per year. Globally, it's $12 billion per year. So in the United States, $2 billion, globally, $12 billion. What the liability avoidance is actually worth. So if they're spraying it from aircraft, they're avoiding a bigger cost. What the liability avoidance is actually worth. Kingston cost over $1 billion in cleanup before the first lawsuit was filed. $1 billion before a lawsuit was even filed. Price that liability across hundreds of aging American fly ash storage facilities, all accumulating material daily, all subject to structural failure. And the actual cost is existential. The kind that makes $2 billion a year in disposal cost look modest by comparison. The avoided catastrophic liability exposure across the entire American fleet of fly ash storage infrastructure exceeds the direct disposal cost savings by a multiple that risk management departments have calculated privately, they have, and will not share publicly. Here's another one of these succinct lines I need the idiot older brothers like mine out there to hear. $2 billion annually in American disposal cost avoidance, $12 billion globally, incalculable liability exposure eliminated against the cost of a permit with no ingredient list. This is not a conspiracy. This is a business decision. Part 7, the template. How they already did this to your water. This is important. This is an important template to understand and to grasp. How they already did this to your water. The most important thing to understand about what is happening in the sky is not the chemistry or the permits or even the economics. The most important thing is that this has already been done successfully for over 70 years. The medium you and your children drink from every day, with the full endorsement of the medical establishment, the dental establishment, and the regulatory apparatus of the United States government. The fluoride story, industrial waste renamed. The fluoride in American municipal tap water is not pharmaceutical grade fluoride. The fluoride in American municipal tap water is not pharmaceutical grade fluoride. It is fluosilicic acid. Fluosilicic acid. It's always a word I have trouble pronouncing. It is fluosilicic acid. It's the liquid waste product captured when phosphate rock is processed into fertilizer. The processing off gases hydrogen fluoride and silicon tetrafluoride, toxic compounds that were, before the 1940s, escaping into communities surrounding phosphate processing plants, killing livestock, destroying crops, and generating litigation the industry could not sustain. The gases had to be captured. Tons of people were getting sick, and they started suing these companies. And these companies were going to go bankrupt from these lawsuits. So the gases had to be captured. The captured liquid, the fluosilicic acid, is classified industrial waste. Disposing of it costs money, but waste reclassified as product is not waste anymore. And if a health benefit can be attached to it, if the regulatory structure can be persuaded to create a municipal market for it, if credentialed institutions can be brought to endorse it, the liability inverts. The disposal cost becomes revenue. This is hard to just It's going to make more sense. I'm going to read that really quick. The gases had to be captured. The captured liquid, the fluosilicic acid, is classified industrial waste. Disposing of it costs tons of money. But waste reclassified as a product is not waste anymore. And if a health benefit can be attached to it, if the regulatory structure can be persuaded to create a municipal market for it, if credentialed institutions can be brought to endorse it, the liability inverts. The disposal costs become revenue. In 1983, EPA Deputy Assistant Administrator Rebecca Hanmer wrote in an internal communication, now public record, that adding captured phosphate industry exhaust to municipal water supplies was an ideal solution to a long-standing problem. Her exact words, an ideal solution to a long-standing problem. The problem was the industry's disposal problem. The ideal solution was your city's water supply purchased with your water bill and taxes. Dr. J. William Hersey, former senior vice president of the EPA headquarters union, stated it for the congressional record. Here's what he said. He countered what she was saying years later. He said, if this material gets into the air, it's a pollutant. If it gets into the river, it's a pollutant. If it gets into the lake, it's a pollutant. But run it through the drinking water system and it becomes a dental health program. Read Christopher Bryson's book, The Fluoride Deception. The Fluoride Deception by Christopher Bryson, it's available from Seven Stories Press, came out in 2004. It is a definitive investigative account of how the fluoride program was constructed, who funded the science that justified it, and what the science actually showed. Bryson is an award-winning journalist who spent 10 years on this investigation, drawing on declassified government documents, internal industry communications, and interviews with scientists who worked on fluoride research and later broke with the institutional consensus. Bryson documents the Mellon Institute's their early fluoride research funded directly by the aluminum and steel industries facing fluoride pollution litigation. These companies were getting their asses sued, and they had to figure out how to save their asses. So they did some insidious evil. The aluminum steel industries were facing fluoride pollution litigation. And so this, which university was it? It was the Mellon Institute. So the Mellon Institute funded directly by the aluminum and steel industries facing fluoride pollution litigation, and its role in producing the scientific foundation for the claim that fluoride was safe and beneficial. So big industry paid the Mellon Institute to create this manufactured science to say that fluoride was safe and beneficial. Yeah. Christopher Bryson traces the specific mechanism by which industrial waste was converted into a public health program. Industry-funded science, regulatory capture, institutional endorsement, and a health benefit label that made questioning the substance feel like questioning medicine itself. If you read one book that explains both the fluoride story and the template it provides for everything that follows, this book is the one. What Bryson found in the fluoride story is the same architecture you will find in the cloud seeding permit, with no ingredient disclosure requirement, the same logic, the same mechanism, the same move. This book's available, like I said, from Seven Stories Press, 2004, Christopher Bryson, The Fluoride Deception. You can find it at any bookstore, Amazon, etc. The cloud seeding permit is just the fluoride program at altitude. That's all it is. It's the same thing. The cloud seeding permit is just the fluoride deception at altitude. The energy companies holding these permits have the same disposal problem that the phosphate industry had in 1945, just measured in hundreds of millions of tons instead of millions of gallons. Part 8. We're getting there. We're over halfway through. How long have we been going so far? Hour and 20 minutes? Okay. All right. Part 8. This part's going to be also hard to explain. This is a lot for everyone to keep in their noggins right now. This next part's very important to understand, and I hope you're still with me here. Part 8. This is where we are. Part 8, the background noise strategy. How atmospheric deposition defeats ground level litigation. Part 8, the background noise strategy. How atmospheric deposition, that means to deposit into the atmosphere, defeats ground level litigation. There is a dimension to the atmospheric disposal program that goes beyond simple waste management economics. It is a legal strategy, and it may be the most sophisticated element of the entire system. In every toxic tort case brought against a coal utility for fly ash ground contamination, such as the Battlefield Golf Club plaintiffs in Virginia, or the town of Pines families in Indiana, or the well owners in Maryland and Montana, the plaintiff must prove that their specific contamination came from the defendant's specific facility. This is called causation. Without it, there is no case, regardless of how sick the plaintiff is or how toxic the material is. The defense strategy in every one of these cases exploits the same vulnerability. Establish that the heavy metals found in the plaintiff's soil and water, the aluminum, arsenic, barium, strontium, chromium, exist at elevated levels everywhere from multiple sources, such that the plaintiff cannot prove their contamination came specifically from the defendant's ash pond rather than from the general environment. In the Battlefield Golf Club litigation, Dominion's legal team argued that the heavy metal concentrations found in surrounding wells were consistent with naturally elevated background levels and could not be definitively attributed to the fly ash beneath the golf course. Arsenic, 700 times the safe level. And the defense argument was, you cannot prove it came from us specifically. Now, apply this to atmospheric spraying. If fly ash is being continuously introduced into the atmosphere above the continental United States, depositing aluminum, barium, strontium, arsenic, and chromium into soil and groundwater everywhere uniformly without a traceable ground level point of origin, then every ground level fly ash contamination lawsuit is fighting against a baseline that has been pre-contaminated by the atmospheric program itself. The defense lawyer does not need to prove the contamination came from the sky. He needs only to demonstrate that these exact substances exist at elevated background levels in comparison samples taken from locations nowhere near the client's ash pond. The atmospheric deposition, the depositing in the atmosphere, does that work silently in advance across the entire country. The atmospheric disposal program does not just eliminate the Kingston liability for the material it carries, it actively degrades the evidentiary foundation for every ground level Kingston lawsuit that still needs to be litigated. It poisons the baseline. It raises the noise floor. It makes the hotspot look like the environment. I hope this makes sense to you guys. This is already happening in courtrooms right now. Every toxic tort attorney fighting a fly ash contamination case in America is fighting against a baseline that no longer exists in the form it needs to exist to win the causation argument cleanly. The EPA sets its baseline reference levels using ambient environmental measurements. If atmospheric deposits have been raising background concentrations of aluminum, strontium, barium, and arsenic for decades, then the EPA's own reference baselines incorporate that contamination as normal. The regulatory safe harbor moves with the contamination. The goalpost moves because the field has been flooded and the original markings are underwater. Here's one succinct, bold paragraph. The program contaminates the environment. The contaminated environment becomes the new baseline. The new baseline is used to defend against litigation arising from contamination. The litigation fails, the program continues, the baseline rises again. The atmospheric disposal program is not just today's waste management solution, it's yesterday's legal alibi. I'm going to do that one really fast. The program contaminates the environment. The contaminated environment becomes the new baseline. The new baseline is used to defend against litigation arising from the contamination. The litigation fails. The program continues. The baseline rises again. The atmospheric disposal program is not just today's waste management solution, it is yesterday's legal alibi. Part 9, the thread from fluoride to fly ash in 8 steps. I need to get a drink of water again. Hold on 1 second. Part 9, the thread from fluoride to fly ash in 8 steps. Coal combustion produces fly ash, a toxic heavy metal particulate legally required to be captured before it exits the smokestack at ground level because it is dangerous, and its ground level release is regulated under the Clean Air Act. The United States generates approximately 75 million tons of this material annually with no low-cost legal disposal destination. 200,000 tons every day that must go somewhere. Legal ground level disposal costs between $15 and $50 per ton, 2.25 billion annually in the United States alone, and carries catastrophic liability when storage fails, as documented in Kingston. Billions of dollars, dozens dead, Battlefield Golf Club, arsenic, 700 times safe levels, 400 plaintiffs, Town of Pines, 1,300 times 300 times the safe arsenic levels in children's playgrounds. Oika Hungary, 10 dead, 4 countries threatened, and 76 documented Indian ash pond failures in 1 decade. The atmosphere is the only disposal commons on Earth with no Superfund designation, no EPA liability category, no cleanup mandate, no class action mechanism sufficient to establish causation, and no cost. Multiple American states issue cloud seeding permits to private companies, including energy utilities. Idaho Power Company holds such permits in Idaho. They hold such permits in Idaho, Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, California, North Dakota, Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, and more. They all have active programs. This is public record. Not one of these states requires payload disclosure. The federal government doesn't require payload disclosure. The permit authorizes the spraying. The permit does not specify or require public disclosure of what is being sprayed. No independent laboratory verifies the payload. No post-operation sampling is required. The fluoride template already proved this exact mechanism works at scale. Industrial waste reclassified as a public health benefit delivered through a public medium with no plain language disclosure requirement sustained for over 70 years with full institutional endorsement. EPA documentation confirms it. Christopher Bryson documented it in the book, The Fluoride Deception. We're getting close to the end here. Atmospheric deposition. So spraying into the atmosphere, spraying fly ash simultaneously raises background noise. I need to change a little way I word things in here for the future here when I do it on the podcast. Thanks for hanging in here with me, everybody. Atmospheric deposition of flash. So spraying flash in the atmosphere simultaneously raises background levels of the exact heavy metals found in ground level contamination sites, actively degrading the evidence foundation for toxic tort litigation by poisoning the comparison baseline, making the hot spots invisible against the rising noise floor. This is the most important thing. This is one of the most important things you have to take away from this. Spraying the flash in the sky simultaneously raises the background levels of the exact heavy metals found in ground level contamination sites, actively degrading the evidentiary foundation for toxic tort litigation by poisoning the comparison baseline, making the hotspots invisible against the rising noise floor. Here comes a succinct line. Listen to this one. This is not a mystery program. This is a waste disposal operation running in the open using a legal permit, hiding in the one place on earth that has no garbage laws and no ingredient disclosure requirement. This is not a mystery program. This is a waste disposal operation running in the open using a legal permit, hiding in the one place on earth that has no garbage laws and no ingredient disclosure requirement. Part 10, the regulator. This is where it gets even freakier, you guys. Wait till we get to this part. Part 10, the regulator. The man now in charge of the oversight that nobody's enforcing, this just gets gross. Everything documented in this paper converges on a single regulatory question. Who is responsible for requiring disclosure of what is being sprayed into the atmosphere above us? And are they doing their job? The answer to this first question is specific and statutory. The Weather Modification Reporting Act this is ancient. It's older than me. The Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972 requires anyone who conducts weather modification activities in the United States to file a report with the Secretary of Commerce at least 10 days before operations commence. The reports are filed on the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration's Form 17-4. So the reports are filed on NOAA's Form 17-4. The Secretary of Commerce is the single individual in the United States government with the statutory authority and administrative responsibility to strengthen weather modification oversight, update the reporting forms, impose meaningful enforcement consequences for non-filers, and require the payload disclosure that currently does not exist. This just gets really bad. We're going to get into just some crazy stuff here, and we're almost done this episode. The answer to the second question was provided yesterday on my brother's birthday. The answer to the second question was provided on February 23rd, 2026 by the Government Accountability Office. This is where we started this episode. So the answer to the second question of who do we ask to find out what they're spraying? Who's in charge of this? The Government Accountability Office, Congress's independent nonpartisan auditing arm, the most unimpeachable source of documented findings in American government. After a full year of the current Secretary of Commerce's leadership, the Government Accountability Office concluded that NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, is still not meeting its weather modification oversight responsibilities. The regulatory gap this document describes is not theoretical. The Government Accounting Office confirmed it in writing yesterday, February 23rd. You can look it up online. That's what I started this whole podcast episode with, was that government document number. You can look it up. Postscript. We're getting to the end of this. We're in the postscript now of who to look at, who to ask these questions to. He comes up in the news a lot, and he's a total creeper. Howard Lutnick. Do you know who Howard Lutnick is? This is the head of he's the Secretary of Commerce. This is the guy at the top of these programs. The man at the intersection. For investigative citizen journalists and anyone who wants to know who to ask. We're getting close. The current United States Secretary of Commerce is Howard Lutnick. He was confirmed on February 18th, 2025. So he was confirmed a year ago. 1 year and 5 days before the Government Accountability Office published its report, finding that NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, finding that NOAA, he oversees NOAA. The Secretary of Commerce oversees NOAA. So the Government Accountability Office published its report finding that NOAA, which answers to the Secretary of Commerce, to Lutnick, is failing its weather modification oversight responsibilities, that more than half of filed atmospheric operation reports contain errors or missing information, that companies are conducting atmospheric operations without filing any reports at all, and that the reporting forms have no framework for capturing sophisticated atmospheric payloads. Howard Lutnick did not inherit a problem and immediately face a Government Accountability Office report. He ran the department for a full year. The Government Accountability Office watched what happened during that year, and after a full year of his leadership, the Government Accountability Office concluded that NOAA is still not meeting its weather modification oversight responsibilities. I need to fix something because he did inherit a problem. This has been going on for so long. He did inherit a problem. I said he did not, and that's a mistake. He did inherit this problem, and then he's been in there for a year, and it's only getting worse. They're just spraying more and more and more every year. It's like every year it gets worse because we burn more coal every year. now data centers, everything. We just burn more and more fossil fuels and coal and all this shit, and it's just everything's getting more polluted rapidly. So the Government Accountability Office says that NOAA is not doing its job, that all these companies are spraying and they're not telling us what they're spraying. And they're not even doing the paperwork. And they're just getting away with it. So Government Accountability Office says that NOAA is still not meeting its weather modification oversight responsibilities. Who is Howard Lutnick? Well, what Cantor Fitzgerald, so he worked for this company called Cantor Fitzgerald for a long time before Trump appointed him as the Secretary of Commerce. What Cantor Fitzgerald was doing in the energy industry before taking office, Lutnick spent decades as chairman and CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the world's largest financial services and investment banking firms. Cantor Fitzgerald built a dedicated power, energy, and infrastructure investment banking division with over 20 years of experience advising utilities, independent power producers, coal commodity markets, and natural gas companies. So he's advising all these power companies. And what's he advising them how to do? Essentially, how to pollute more. Cantor Fitzgerald built a specific trading desk for pollution allowances. The EPA's cap and trade system for sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides from coal power plants. Under this system, coal utilities receive permits to emit a certain amount of pollution. If a plant emits less than its allowance, it can sell its surplus. If it wants to emit more, it buys additional allowances. Cantor Fitzgerald was in the business of brokering these trades, literally buying and selling the legal right to pollute on behalf of energy companies. So this is what Lutnick was doing for a long time before Trump appointed him, was helping companies figure out how to pollute more. The atmosphere has no pollution allowance system, no cap, no trade, no permit required to introduce material into it from altitude. This is definitely not Lutnick's idea. This has been going on long before him. It is the one major disposal medium never brought inside the regulatory framework that Cantor Fitzgerald spent decades profiting from the edges of. So he's helping companies figure out how to pollute more. And I'm sure that Cantor Fitzgerald ties into the whole spraying of chemtrails too. I guarantee it. Cantor Fitzgerald, guarantee it. What is documented? So Lutnick, just to show how good of a guy he is, he's connected thoroughly to Epstein. The following facts are drawn from the Department of Justice's release of the Epstein files, congressional testimony, and published investigative reporting. Lutnick, he was Epstein's neighbor, literally. Lutnick purchased the property at 11 East 71st Street in New York from an entity called Comet Trust. Sort of sounds like Comet Pizza. He buys this property from Comet Trust, which had 2 years earlier purchased the property from Jeffrey Epstein himself. It became Lutnick's primary residence, right next door to Epstein's New York mansion. Lutnick told Congress he cut ties in 2005 with Epstein, but the files prove otherwise. Howard Lutnick stated publicly that he cut ties with Epstein in 2005 after getting a tour of his house and seeing things that gave him a bad feeling. But documents from the Epstein files show Lutnick visited Epstein's island, Little St. James, for lunch on December 24, 2012, 4 years after Epstein's 2008 guilty plea to soliciting prostitution from a minor. Howard Lutnick was in business with Epstein after the conviction. Lutnick and Epstein each signed on behalf of limited liability companies in a business venture called Adfin. Their deal was signed 4 days after the island visit in December 2012. Correspondence relating to Adfin continued until at least 2014, involving Cantor Ventures, a venture capital subsidiary of Cantor Fitzgerald. So here's Epstein and Lutnick working in a subsidiary for Cantor Fitzgerald. Previously unreported elements of the Epstein files reveal mutual business involvement continuing until at least 2018. Epstein donated money in Lutnick's honor after his conviction. In 2017, Epstein donated $50,000 to a New York charity in honor of Howard Lutnick, according to the files. Congress called it lying. Senator Chris Van Hollen stated, "The issue is not that you engaged in any wrongdoing in connection with Jeffrey Epstein, but that you totally misrepresented the extent of your relationship with him to the Congress, to the American people, and to the survivors of his despicable criminal and predatory acts." Senator Lisa Murkowski said, "It just causes me to question the credibility and the integrity of the individual, that they have lied." Representative Republican Thomas Massey, Congressman Thomas Massey, he called for Howard Lutnick's resignation, and Democratic what's her name? Democratic Representative Ro Khanna. I don't remember who Ro Khanna is. Is it a guy, a girl? I think it's a lady, but Democratic Representative Ro Khanna joined Thomas Massey in asking for Howard Lutnick to resign. The guy needs to resign. He has a lot of questions he needs to answer, but would you trust any of his answers? Hell no. Gets even creepier. Howard Lutnick, the 9/11 dimension. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, Howard Lutnick was not in his office on the 105th floor of the North Tower because he had taken his son to his first day of kindergarten. None of the 658 Cantor employees who went to the office that day survived. 658 of his employees died that day. Lutnick came under heavy criticism when, within days of the attack, he stopped paychecks for employees who had perished. Lutnick later quietly kept a portion of the $135 million settlement that Cantor Fitzgerald received from American Airlines over negligence related to the 9/11 attacks. Oh, man. He distributed the bulk of that settlement among the firm's partners rather than to the families of employees who died. So he didn't give money to the families of people who died. He just spread that wealth amongst his cronies at the top. The sulfuric acid threat, I don't know what this is about, but on December 6, 2018, the same day that the FBI announced it was reopening its investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, Epstein ordered 6 55-gallon drums of sulfuric acid totaling 330 gallons to be delivered to his private island, Little St. James. The official explanation was maintenance of a reverse osmosis desalination system. The quantity and the timing have never been adequately explained. So that's just a little side note on his buddy Epstein. Why Howard Lutnick is the interview. Every thread in this document leads to the same office. The energy industry's fly ash disposal economics lead to the cloud seeding permit. The cloud seeding permit leads to the Weather Modification Reporting Act. The Weather Modification Reporting Act leads to the Secretary of Commerce. The Government Accountability Office report published yesterday says the Secretary of Commerce's agency is failing to enforce it. The Secretary of Commerce spent decades in intimate financial relationship with the energy industry that benefits most from that failure. Does this make sense? Can I read through that one more time really quickly? Why Howard Lutnick is in this interview? Because every thread in this document leads to the same office. The energy industry's fly ash disposal economics lead to the cloud seeding permit. The cloud seeding permit leads to the Weather Modification Reporting Act. The Weather Modification Reporting Act leads to the Secretary of Commerce. The Government Accountability Office report published yesterday says the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, is failing to enforce it. The Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, spent decades in intimate financial relationship with the energy industry that benefits most from that failure. Here's the big question. The question is still the same one it has always been. What is in the payload? The Government Accountability Office said yesterday that NOAA is not finding out. The Secretary of Commerce is the person the law designates to fix that. His name is Howard Lutnick. 5 questions every investigative citizen can put in writing. 5 questions. 5 questions every investigative citizen, investigative journalist can put into writing. Here's the 5 questions. Ready? Given the Government Accountability Office's finding published February 23rd, 2026, that NOAA is not meeting its weather modification reporting oversight responsibilities, what specific steps has Secretary Howard Lutnick taken to strengthen payload disclosure requirements for permitted atmospheric operations? That's the first question. Second question. What is Secretary Howard Lutnick's position on requiring independent laboratory verification of payload contents before any permitted atmospheric aerosol operation commences above populated areas, above anywhere? Populated, I mean, everything's populated. It's populated with trees, animals, water, not like, come on. Given Cantor Fitzgerald, the company he worked for, however, given Cantor Fitzgerald's documented history of energy industry investment and pollution allowance trading, does Secretary Howard Lutnick believe a conflict of interest exists in his oversight of weather modification reporting? And has he recused himself from any relevant decisions? Huge conflict of interest there. Question 4 of 5. What enforcement actions has the Commerce Department, his department, taken against operators currently conducting atmospheric operations without filing required reports under the Weather Modification Reporting Act? What action have you taken? What is the Commerce Department's position on updating NOAA's Form 17-4, designed in 1972 to capture the payload contents of modern atmospheric operations, including those conducted by energy companies and their contractors? What are you going to do to update that form from 1972? If you want to write to him, I encourage that you do. His office is at 1401 Constitution Avenue, Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20230. The GAO report is GAO 26108013. The statute is the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972, 15 USC. I'm going to show this to you right here. It's at the bottom of this. See if I can get this on the camera. It's very close to the bottom. See that? His office is 1401 Constitution Avenue, Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20230. The GAO report is GAO 26108013. The statute is the Weather Modification Reporting Act of 1972, 15 USC 330 et sec. The permit is public record at idwr.idaho.gov. We are almost done. Closing, we come back to where we started. Before I showed you any of this, the fly ash, the Kingston disaster, the golf course with the arsenic 700 times the safe level, the Hungarian village buried in toxic mud, the $2 billion a year in avoided disposal costs, the permit with no ingredient list, the fluoride in your tap water that the EPA official called an ideal solution to an industry problem, the background noise strategy that poisons the litigation baseline. Before any of that, I handed you a government report number GAO 26108013. You now know what fly ash is. You know what Kingston cost. You know what the golf course in Virginia did to the children living next to it. You know what happened when the reservoir wall failed in Hungary. You know what the fluoride in your tap water actually is and where Christopher Bryson documented it, where it all came from. You know the permit exists. You know the permit has no ingredient list. You know the math. $2 billion a year in avoided disposal costs. That makes the motive undeniable. You know that the background levels of aluminum, strontium, and barium are rising everywhere, making it progressively harder for any plaintiff in any courtroom to prove that the contamination in their well came from the facility next door rather than from the sky above us all. And you know that the one federal agency responsible for overseeing what gets sprayed, NOAA, reporting to the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, was found yesterday by the government's own auditing arm to be failing at their job. That the forms have no framework for sophisticated payloads, that companies are spraying without filing any reports at all, that the oversight is broken by the government's own admission. The man responsible for fixing that oversight is Howard Lutnick. He has been Secretary of Commerce for over a year. The Government Accountability Office watched him for that year, and this is what the Government Accountability Office found at the end of it. You do not need to trust me. You do not need to trust any researcher or documentary or alternative media source. You can go to gao.gov, type in GAO 26108013. Once again, right here at the very bottom. Look, right there. GAO.gov, type in GAO 26108013. There's 4 pages to read there. 4 pages. You can go read those 4 pages and then ask your senator one question. Given what the Government Accountability Office found, what law requires disclosure of what is being sprayed in the atmosphere above your constituents? When they cannot name that law, and they cannot because it does not exist, you will have arrived at the same place this entire investigation arrives, not a theory, at a permit with a missing ingredient list and $2 billion a year explaining why the list stays missing. $2 billion a year is like the most conservative number. We're talking probably $1 trillion a year if you factor in all the liability and lawsuits avoided and all that stuff. So once again, ask your senator, call him, write him, and ask what law requires disclosure of what is being sprayed into the atmosphere above your constituents. What, like, go read the GAO what they found. We're being sprayed. I know it, you know it, but guys like my older brother can't see it. When the senator cannot name the law, and they can't because it doesn't exist, you will have arrived at the same place this entire investigation arrives. Not a theory, at a permit with a missing ingredient list. All right, that was 2 hours, and thanks for listening. You can find me at Lowlit Studio. I do podcasts on Spotify, and I have a Patreon, Lowlit Studio at Patreon, and this takes, even though the production quality is subpar and difficult, I have a very old computer. This is a cheap microphone. This is like shoestring. It's a lot of work. This is hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of research and stuff to try to present this information. So I'd appreciate your support. If you can support anything, find me over at Patreon, Lowlit Studio. Thank you so much for listening. Have a really great day, great night, wherever you are in the world. Comment, share, subscribe, all the things. Okay, thanks. Bye.